and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching the NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Russia's Belgorod governor Vyacheslav Gladkov has said a Ukrainian strike damaged a dam on a local reservoir. Warning that repeated attacks could cause flooding, he has urged residents of Shebekino and Bezlyovdovka near the Ukrainian border to evacuate as the region has faced frequent strikes since the war began in 2022. Furthermore, the latest Russian aerial attack on Kyiv has killed 2 and injured 10 others, damaging homes, cars, and a kindergarten, according to Kyiv military official, while Ukraine's Air Force has said that it shot down 4 of 9 missiles and 50 of 62 drones, but reported 5 direct missile hits and 12 drone strikes on 11 sites nationwide. Britain's Labour government plans to halve the tax-free cash ISA limit from £20,000 to about £10,000 in the November budget, aiming to shift savers towards investing in shares, as the Telegraph reported, as Financial Services Minister Lucy Rigby has said that the move seeks to build a shareholding democracy. Kathleen Connolly, a far-left independent lawmaker and EU critic, is set to become Ireland's 10th president after opponents from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael conceded defeat. The veteran politician and former deputy speaker, has supported by the left-wing opposition, holds a commanding lead in early tallies so far. Georgia's State Security Service has arrested 3 Chinese nationals in Tbilisi for attempting to illegally purchase 2 kilograms of uranium for $400,000, according to local media reports. Officials have said that the suspects planned to smuggle the nuclear material to China via Russia amid growing concerns over post-Soviet nuclear trafficking. U.S. President Donald Trump leaves for a highly anticipated trip to Asia to test his deal-making skills and mend trade ties. The 5-day tour will take him to Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea. This marks his longest overseas journey since taking office in January. The United States imposes sanctions on Colombian President Gustavo Petro, accusing Bogotá of failing to stop the flow of cocaine into America. Trump has branded Petro an illegal drug leader, a charge the Colombian president strongly denies. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro accuses the United States of fabricating a new war after Washington deploys the world's largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford, to the Caribbean. The move marks a major escalation in U.S. military power as President Trump considers land action in Venezuela amid strikes on alleged drug targets and fears of regime change. Kyiv authorities have stated that at least 1 person was killed and 10 others were injured in Kyiv after Russian missiles and drones struck multiple sites overnight. The attack caused broken windows, damaged cars, and a crater in a residential courtyard. Ukraine's Air Force has said that it shot down 4 of 9 missiles and 50 of 62 drones during the attacks. 5 missile strikes and 12 drone hits were reported on 11 targets across the country. Fires were reported and a kindergarten was also damaged. Debris from downed weapons was strewn across Kyiv, sparking fires in nearly half of the city's districts. Local authorities have said that emergency services, including firefighters, were rushed to the scene as they were seen extinguishing a fire at a warehouse caused by the strikes. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry has reported that Russian air defenses have shot down 121 Ukrainian drones overnight. The ministry has said that 20 drones were shot down over the Rostov region, 19 over the Volgograd region, 17 over the Bryansk region, 9 over the Belgorod region, another 9 over the Moscow region, among many others targeting several other Russian regions. This comes as Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev had earlier stated that the United States, Russia and Ukraine were quite close to a diplomatic solution to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Now for this discussion, we welcome Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from England. Thank you very much, Alison, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Hi.
Alison, what's your analysis about, the recent Russian envoy's statements that he said that United States, Russia and Ukraine were quite close to a diplomatic solution to end the Russia-Ukraine war? What's your analysis on this?
To be quite frank, I think it's a smokescreen. I think this is a message he wants to get out that all is not lost. It was a bit of an embarrassment for Vladimir Putin that Trump cancelled the meeting in Budapest, Hungary, and said that no further progress was being made. And I think the Russians want to promote the idea that this isn't the end of the line and that there is still possibility of talks on a ceasefire. You'll notice that Moscow didn't use the word cancelled. Its official media said the word postponed, whereas Trump said the meeting had been cancelled and there were no further plans for another meeting. So I think Moscow's message to the world is, yes, we are still we're still interested. We want to reach a diplomatic solution. We want a ceasefire and to end hostilities. That's what they're trying to say. But the reality, what they are saying and what is actually happening on the ground are two different things. I don't believe these last statements, but what I do believe is this is the message. This is the spin, if you like, or the narrative that they want to get out to the world, that we are still here, we're still interested in the solution. But I don't see any evidence of that on the ground at this moment.
Yes, indeed. And Alison, now given the continued escalation of this war, how do you think information warfare has been used, and how credible are these recent claims from both parties?
I think the hybrid war, as we call it, or cognitive warfare, I think is its official name, is a very important component of this war. And a lot of people said, in fact, Russia is much better at hybrid war than it is conventional warfare. I mean, they went into Ukraine saying it was a special military operation and thought they would get Ukraine to surrender in 3 days. And here we are more than 3 years. So the hybrid war is a very important war for Russia. And for Ukraine too. They have to present a certain narrative. They have to show that they're winning. They have to show that they're not going to give in. I saw that Vladimir Putin, after Donald Trump slapped sanctions on Russia with the two oil companies and their subsidiaries, Vladimir Putin said, "We will never cave in. They have to pay that they're very strong." To which Donald Trump replied, "We'll see after 6 months," and he seemed to smile at this. So there is a war of words going on, and definitely the hybrid war and the narratives, they are not to be believed. We have to see actually what is happening on the ground and the concrete developments, not what these leaders, particularly in Moscow and to a certain extent in Ukraine as well. Obviously, Ukraine is putting up a huge fight, and they're very skilled and they're very brave. That's clear. But also, I don't think we have to believe everything that's coming out of Moscow. In fact, we'd be very stupid if we did. And with Ukraine as well. I mean, it's in their interest to show that they are fighting back hard as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Alison Mutler, for always joining us and sharing that insight. As a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joining us from England. Thank you. Now we stay on this topic. The Russian Foreign Ministry Ambassador at Large, Rodion Miroshnik, has stated that Russia and US has been working on several tracks without fixing on Ukraine. Miroshnik has pointed out by saying it's an absolute fact that work continues between the US and Russia. He has further concluded by saying that work is underway on more than one track, and it's a good thing that the bilateral relationship is not fixated on the Ukraine conflict. According to Miroshnik, the Europeans want to limit the agenda to the Ukraine issue. He has stated that they prefer the two major global powers to communicate through London or Brussels instead of maintaining direct contact. He has further said strategic objectives of the Europeans who are actively blocking direct dialogue between Russia and US. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. How do you analyze the recent statements coming in from Russia, including the statements that we heard from Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev, saying that U.S. and Russia and Ukraine were quite close to a diplomatic solution to end the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, I doubt very much that they're very close to a permanent resolution to the underlying sources of conflict. It may be the case that they're a little closer to a ceasefire. The conditions seem to be propitious for some kind of limited ceasefire, but it's not going to happen anytime soon because the Russians are still haven't achieved what they want to achieve on the battlefield and are slowly and grindingly achieving what they want to achieve on the battlefield. Once the two provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk are totally in Russian control, I think the Russians will be willing to sit down and negotiate. The broader point, of course, is that great powers sometimes are in confrontation with each other, sometimes they coordinate and they communicate and they collaborate even. And the US and Russia have to talk about the Arctic, about nuclear weapons, about energy. So those issues don't go away just because there's a proxy war being fought in Europe. And that's sort of what I think the Russian spokesperson was driving at.
And what do you think could be the potential implications of U.S. and Russia maintaining dialogue on issues beyond Ukraine? What is there other than Ukraine for now?
Well, I don't like to draw Cold War analogies too often, but I think it's telling that during the Cold War, when there was an existential conflict between the United States and the then Soviet Union, they still sat down at tables and talk to each other about nuclear weapons and about deconflicting in various parts of the world so that it wouldn't be an accidental war. And they'd still negotiated arms control treaties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even though they were locked in this existential conflict, they still managed to coordinate and communicate and even collaborate on certain really important issues. And I think that logic applies here as well, that the US and Russia don't get along. They're engaged in great power competition, not just over Ukraine, but elsewhere in the world. And yet they still both have nuclear arsenals. They still both have common Arctic interests. And obviously the price of energy still matters to both for different reasons. So it's not surprising to me that there are back-channel communications that are still ongoing that are designed to address some of those shared interests and deconflict where possible.
And do you think that if European nations are indeed discouraging direct US-Russia communication, does this reflect a strategic effort to preserve unity within NATO and the EU, or could it undermine opportunities for bilateral talk or trilateral talk?
Yeah, I think some European states intuitively get this. Hungary pops to mind. Hungary has tried to play a role that's equidistant from Moscow and Washington and Brussels to some extent, even though it's part of NATO and part of the European Union. Other, especially the Baltic states and the Nordic states, are a little more extreme, shall we say, a little more fixed in their outlook with respect to Russia. And then there are others, the British and the French and the Germans, that would like to see the end to this war, even if it's just a durable ceasefire, so that they can get on with the business of their countries. And they would like to tone down the conflict between NATO, the European Union on the one hand, and Russia on the other. They're waiting, I think, though, for the circumstances on the battlefield to allow that to happen. And I say again, I underscore this, we're simply not there yet.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Andrew Latham for joining us and sharing that insight throughout this topic. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on to Middle East. The World Health Organization has delivered 238 pallets of medical supplies into Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing. The aid includes insulin, cholera kits, and assistive devices, infection prevention equipment, and other essential medicines. WHO Health Emergency Officer Dario Bertetto has said that the supplies will support hospitals and clinics struggling to treat patients in the conflict-stricken region. Let's listen into what he has said.
We are in WHO warehouse in Khan Yunis. We just arrived with our medical cargo containing cholera kits, medical supplies, and other items that will be delivered in the next 48 hours to the main health facilities still operating in the Gaza.
WHO has said that it has over 2,000 pallets ready for dispatch through Jordan, Egypt, Dubai, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. WHO further warned that current aid remains only a fraction of what is needed to rebuild Gaza's healthcare system. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us and staying with us. Now, what's going on with Gaza's aid situation? And also we have seen WHO and many other organizations speak out that these aid kits as well as other aid flowing into Gaza, it's not enough. What will be happening moving forward on this about aid?
Yes, well, it's not going to be enough for a variety of reasons. First of all, the entire civilian medical care infrastructure has been destroyed in this war. Secondly, Hamas has hijacked previous efforts to deliver aid, medical aid, to the Strip. And so that's a problem. It remains a problem. And then, of course, there's simply the infrastructure, the roads and the bridges, et cetera. The hospitals aren't there to facilitate the delivery, both from outside the region and then once it gets to the Strip to the people of the region. So that's problematic as well. So we're going to be in dire humanitarian straits for some time, I think. However, the fact that the aid is being delivered suggests in the broader peace process or talks that momentum is building, that the Israelis are permitting this to happen, that's a sign of good faith on their part, and that's likely to keep the ball moving downfield, as it were, with respect to this broader ceasefire, phase 1 and then phase 2 and then hopefully phase 3 of the peace process. So not enough in humanitarian terms, not going to be enough for some time, but a positive development nonetheless.
And Professor Andrew, from your analysis and all the latest news as well, what do you think, is there any trustworthy organization that could be trusted for to deliver aid to the people who are in need, the citizens in Gaza?
Well, it won't be UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which has been captured to a large degree by Hamas and by the Palestinian cause. The Israelis simply don't trust it, nor increasingly does the United States and any objective observer. So the fact that the WHO is playing such a prominent role, I think that's a positive development. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations, to be sure, but it's not UNRWA. So both sides have to have confidence in the organization and the institutions that are involved. And I think to the extent that it is parties like the WHO and other parties that are have a track record of delivering aid in an impartial, unbiased, and humanitarian way, I think as long as both Hamas and the Israelis trust that organization, they'll be allowed to do their work. There will always be impediments, but they'll be allowed to do their work.
And building on your answer, how should Israel or community in Gaza balance the need for humanitarian aid delivery to Gaza with the complex political and security restrictions surrounding this conflict, as well as, like you rightly mentioned, the Hamas taking or using these aids?
Well, the humanitarian in me would like to see as much aid delivered without any conditions directly to the people who need it most on the ground. And that can be things like insulin. Imagine your life if you're a diabetic and you didn't have access to that. It's catastrophic. And then all sorts of other maladies that people suffer. The humanitarian impulse is get as much as possible, as quickly as possible. The realpolitik scholar of international relations that I am says, yes, but what has to be delivered in a way that contributes to the peace process, that doesn't undermine the interests of the Israelis or of Hamas from their perspective. And so there's a political dimension to this as well. And then there's the stark physical infrastructure reality. There simply aren't the roads and bridges and crossings of the border that would allow this aid to be delivered unproblematically. So there are those three impulses or logics at play here, and they're not always pulling in the same direction.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Andrew Latham, for joining us and sharing that insight as a Professor of International Relations from Minneapolis. Now we move on to Asia. Afghanistan and Pakistan's negotiators are set to meet in Istanbul to address security issues and establishing a lasting ceasefire along their shared border after an outbreak of unexpected, intense, bloody clashes last week. The confrontations, which resulted in dozens of deaths among them were civilians, which began 2 weeks ago following explosion in central Kabul, which the Afghan Taliban government has blamed Pakistan for launching a retaliatory offensive. After new clashes that claimed the lives of both soldiers and civilians, the two sides announced a 48-hour ceasefire that quickly collapsed 2 days later, with Afghanistan placing the blame on Pakistan again. A second ceasefire was reached on Sunday after talks in Doha mediated by Qatar and Turkey. The truce appears to be holding so far, though its specific terms remain unclear. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.